Welcome back, young entrepreneurs. This is Tony.
And this is Akash.
In this episode, there will be three main takeaways. One being, what are the key attributes to becoming a successful entrepreneur?
Another being, what to do in college in terms of entrepreneurship.
Third, how to grow a company without VC funding. And there's more.
Stick around to hear in-depth information on these topics. So now moving on.
Today we have a very special guest who is a seasoned entrepreneur named Jeff Sant on to talk about what the attributes to becoming a successful entrepreneur are.
Jeff Sant is the co-founder of Pragmatics Financials, which is a leading software as a service company. He also had a 10-year consulting career at Bearing Point in financial services. He graduated from James Madison University in 1997.
Thanks for coming on, Jeff. How's it going?
Very well. Thanks for having me, guys.
So I guess we can just start out with you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. As you sort of mentioned, I went to James Madison University back in 1997. I was a financial engineering major. And from there, I spent 10 years in consulting. But at that time, at the end of my consulting gig, I realized I wanted to get into entrepreneurship. And I wanted to build something. I didn't want to just sell services or sell my resume for a rate per hour. I wanted to actually build something tangible. And so at that point, along with two other guys, ended up starting a company called Pragmatics Financial. And then we had about a 10-year run where we grew it organically from scratch. So from the three of us to about 425 employees internationally, doing about $60 million a year of revenue, all sort of organically grown without really borrowing any money. So from there, that was 2 years ago, we ended up selling the company to a large fintech company called SS&C Technologies. So that it was sort of my entrepreneurial endeavor, and it was about a 10-year run, and we can get into some of the successes of that here in a bit.
Yeah, so Akash, you can start us out with our first question here.
So you already touched on this a bit, but how did you get into entrepreneurship, and why did you pursue entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, at some point you get to a level of experience where you feel like, okay, well, maybe I can do this on my own. Maybe I don't necessarily need the infrastructure of a big company, or I don't need some of the support mechanisms that you see in a big company. I felt like there was an opportunity in the market that we could exploit. And at that point in time, hey, I was single. I didn't have kids, so the amount of risk I felt like I was taking personally was minimal. So that sort of got us into the spot. So it's sort of a combination of wanting to do your own thing plus the opportunity presenting itself. So the timing was right for that.
Awesome. So you talked about this also a little bit already, but what are some of your biggest accomplishments? And then to go along with your accomplishments, what were some of the hardest struggles you had in building your business?
That's a great question. I mean, from an accomplishment, you can count on one hand some of the amount of companies out there that were able to organically grow from 0 to 425 people. We ended up selling for a valuation of $125 million. And that's not an easy thing to do in a 10-year run.
Right.
And so we're very proud, and I'm very proud that we were able to accomplish that task, while at the same time, it wasn't necessarily dependent purely on us. By the time we ended our tenure there, that company's still going. Pragmatics Financial is still going. So to build something that's sustainable, that you put your value into, but then you created something that when you leave, it continues its own value path. We're very proud of that as well. And I'm proud to say, too, that a lot of our employees, a lot of the vice presidents that we had when we left are now in those executive leadership roles. And that was something that was very key for us. And then, of course, our customers. We were able to leave our customers with something of great value. So when looking back on it, we felt like that's a very hard thing to try to accomplish. And we're very proud that we were able to do that.
Wow, that's really cool. So do you mind telling us maybe a bit more about what Pragmatics Financials is, like a synopsis of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was, as you guys mentioned, it's a software as a service, but it dealt with banks. And for banks have to account and value all the loans that they give. So you guys will have student loans, and you'll grow up and have mortgages, and companies have commercial loans. All those loans are provided by banks, And those banks have to value those loans, understand the risk of those loans, and account for them. Our system accomplished those tasks. Some of those are business oriented and some are regulatory oriented. For example, PNC Bank was a very large client of ours. They had about $300 billion worth of loans on their balance sheet, a lot of which was going through our system. So our system was primarily responsible for valuing and doing the accounting for these loans.
Oh, it's really cool.
What attributes of entrepreneurship did you know when you were starting off, and what attributes did you learn over time as becoming more of a seasoned entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, naivete is a great quality when you're starting this stuff. Knowing too much is a bad thing. You don't want to necessarily know what you're going to get yourself into, because that first company you start, it's going to be hard. That first year, we were putting half the time I was doing work for clients, and the other half I was putting up shelves in their office or trying to fix a server. So you're the jack of all trades that first year. So your ability to be flexible, to have a vision, but also be able to listen to the marketplace and adapt to what the marketplace is doing. A lot of people on the technology side make the mistake of they think they know more than the market. This is what the market needs. I'll build it and I'll push what I know. But if you listen to the market, you'll be able to better understand how to tweak yourself. So over the 10 years, we learned how to better listen to the clients, better listen to the market, and we stayed adaptable. So as new regulations came up or new technologies came up, we were able to stay ahead of it. So we were actually one of Amazon Web Services' first clients, and they're the biggest cloud provider out there. And we were one of the first ones on them. So we were able to stay flexible in our ways. And then, to be honest with you, it's really about out-gritting everyone else. Yeah. We didn't have the best idea. There's a lot of people who have good ideas, but the one with the best idea does not win. They typically don't win. It's the one who can deal with the most pain. That's who wins. Google didn't invent search. Most of the biggest companies out there didn't invent what they're good at. They took someone else's idea and made it better and persisted it much harder than everyone else. So we didn't know accounting for loans better than anyone else, but we were the ones who came up with an interesting solution, and we pushed it as hard as we could. And that's what entrepreneurship is in my mind. It's that passion for what you're doing and that ability to overcome obstacles every single time and then enjoy that process.
That's awesome. So this is a bit of an odd question, but if you could go back to when you first started your business and talk to your younger self, what advice or what would you tell your younger self before you started the business?
Yeah, I would say trust your instincts more. We were young, we were 30 years old, and there were times throughout the 10 years that we probably hired a senior level person or spent money because we wanted to bring some level of experience, because we felt like, well, maybe we don't know. Maybe we need someone who's been there, done that. And every time we did that, it never worked out very well. And in the end, if they did recommend something, it was something we felt like we were going to do anyway. So we probably made some mistakes, and I'll use the quote of we brought some foxes into the hen house, which is not great, because we didn't necessarily trust ourselves at the beginning as much.
Right.
So I would go back and say, hey, don't think there's someone out there who knows more than you. Trust yourself. You're in this. It's your baby. You know what's best for the company. You're the one that's passionate about it. And just trust your instincts.
So as a young entrepreneur, who was your biggest role model in the business world that you looked up to for maybe advice, but not on a personal level, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I had a grandfather who was an entrepreneur, and my path towards business was probably influenced by him. From a work perspective, I had some mentors when I first started who really encouraged me to, again, trust my instincts, and they actually served as advisors. So when I first started my company, we quickly started an advisory board of these 3 or 4 mentors that some of us had, just to make sure that we can trust, to make sure we're bouncing ideas off of. So that was very instrumental to helping us get our legs underneath us.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually had one, before we get to the main question here, I had a question on how many hours a day are you expected to put into every aspect of building your company as a whole, on every level, like networking, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, when we had a 10-year run. So going from a 3-person shop to a 425-person shop doing 60 million, you're going to go through some phases. Your first phase of getting to your first 10 million and getting to your first 20 employees, you're doing everything, right? So you do have to have a plan, a business plan that everyone operates to. So you're thinking about your market, your customers, your technology, your network, your infrastructure, HR, all those things. Then at some point, you're getting big enough where you start to have other people focus in on those details, and you're starting to bring yourself up a level. And then you have to start laying out plans for, how to get from 10 million to 20 million. How do you get from 20 to 50? How do you get to 50 to 100? And those are all different strategies. A lot of people say it can be pretty easy to get to your first 10 million, but it's quite difficult to get to that next 10 million, because the first 10 million was all on your back. It was all on your effort. But how do you make the next 10 million on someone else's back, someone else's effort? So being able to step away from doing the work and being able to manage the work, stepping away from managing the work to being the GM. So think about a football team. You went from being the quarterback on the field, throwing the pass, to the coach calling the play.
Yeah.
And you went from calling the play to the GM hiring the people. Then you went from the GM to the president overlooking the books. So you got to have to think about, just because you were a good quarterback doesn't mean you're a great GM, or you're a great GM doesn't make you a great owner. But as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to make those different advancements in your career.
Yeah, it's a key skill.
So, I guess here's a question we've been leading up to. What skills are found in a successful entrepreneur, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is vision. That you got to have sort of a big picture vision combined with, I'm ready to get my hands dirty from day one. So that ability to get your hands dirty but maintain a vision for something is key. 2 is you got to sell that vision. Whether you're hiring someone, whether you're talking to your partner, whether you're selling something to a customer. So being able to articulate your vision and generate a level of understanding or influence about what you're talking about. I mean, we were talking about loans and loan accounting. That's boring. But we made it exciting for folks. So we talked about the technology to tech folks. We talked about, of course, accountants like to talk about the accounting. But there's a way to talk about your company that's bigger than what it actually does. And that level of passion, people are going to be galvanized by that. So people are going to want to follow you. That's a magnetic type of an approach towards things. So having that level of passion combined with the ability to effectuate the action and make that vision real. And that's not necessarily a one-person job. Remember, I said there was 3 of us.
Yeah.
And that was very complimentary. I was more the market sales guy, and my business partner was more that technology who can take that vision and create something with it. And then the third guy was the delivery guy who was able to take that technology and deliver it to the client. So that 3-legged stool ended up being something that was vital for us, that we couldn't survive individually without those other 2 pieces.
That's some great insight right there. So I guess now do you want to move on to the side questions?
Yeah, we have a couple, not too much. It's still on the topic, but they're just a little random.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we have, are there any particular books you read or are reading now even that are helpful for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few for startups and stuff. I know I do some work at James Madison University, and there's an entrepreneurship program there, and they recommend a book. I know the class they have recommends a book called "The Monk in a Monk in a Riddle." I think it's called. I think I might have it here somewhere. And there's also there's another one I really enjoyed. It was called Chaos Monkeys. And this more talks about your traditional venture capital backed entrepreneurship. Yeah. You got an idea, Silicon Valley. It's you don't really have any money coming in, but you're getting seeded by some angel investors, and then you're going to round 2 and round 3 and round 4. And it talks about what it takes to accomplish that way of doing things. For my experience, we ended up generating cash right up front doing services, and then we bootstrap that cash to create a product, which is another way of doing it. But I think those two books help me from just understanding what it means to own something and do some entrepreneurship. The other books to me are far more psychological leadership type of stuff. Like I'm a big this book is called Drive.
Yeah.
It talks a lot just about people and trying to understand people, because when you're trying to sell something, you're trying to sell investors, employees, customers, understanding the psychology of folks and understanding how to connect with them in a meaningful way is more important than you actually knowing the technology or knowing the content of whatever you're dealing with. You got to know people.
Right.
Cool. So the question is, have you seen the show Silicon Valley? And if you have, how realistic is that show?
Well, yeah, I mean, like anything Hollywood does, it's some of it's based on more the 20% outliers. But yeah, I mean, it's a very much a dog eat dog world. It's very competitive. Being able to filter through the BS and the BS is from those who are starting something to those who are rich and trying to give money to, and some of it could just be a pure game that someone can play. And then once you have something, then some of the crazy things people do, I think it kind of caters on that. But if you look up and do research on startup companies and their valuations and when they end up selling, 90% of those companies have some sort of profit, have some sort of EBITDA and valuation based on their EBITDA. It's not this I don't make any money and there's just this grand idea and I'm going to be the next sort of Instagram or next sort of that's your 5%.
Yeah.
But I think that ends up getting talked about a lot. But I think young entrepreneurs should think more about eventually coming up with something that has more of a cash flow driven model.
I had one more question. So for young entrepreneurs who are like ourselves in the teenage range, going to college, what are the most important things that we need to study to be successful in today's business world?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I was always a fan of engineering-based things. Economics. I think I loved economics because it teaches people how to think, and it's a very macro type of subject. So you're sort of understanding how forces play in economics. Accounting is very important. Simply to understand how to measure financial statements, but not necessarily all the rules and auditing type of things. And then, of course, anything technology related. Technology is not a skill anymore. It's an environment you operate in.
Yeah.
So being able to understand more of the cutting edge technology, some of the cloud-based stuff, some of the machine learning stuff and the AI and that type of stuff is important. And combining that with your basic fundamental business skills. So digital marketing, the accounting, the economics, so those are your macro pieces. And then, of course, your technology, being able to combine those two things together, I think is important. But to be honest, guys, get involved in things at college. You're not going to learn what it means to be an entrepreneur at a class.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to learn because you're going to experiment with stuff in college. You're going to go take some classes, join some groups, take a chance on something, go try to start something, sell something, do something that is outside of the classroom. That's where you'll learn your entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, I believe heavily in that.
Yeah, it's some great advice.
So do you have anything else?
I think that's it.
So I think that about wraps it up. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your day.
Yeah, and thanks for being the first person to kick our podcast off. Really appreciate it.
Well, I think what you guys are doing is cool. This again shows entrepreneurial spirit of yourselves, and I'm actually quite honored to be your first guest.
All right, guys, that was Jeff Sant with the key attributes to being a successful entrepreneur. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Young Entrepreneurs.
Thank you guys for listening. And please make sure to tune in for the next episode, where we will be having a young entrepreneur to talk to you guys. Thank you.